Thank you, Karina Mioto. Yeah, that was awesome. I better race on now. We've got Donovan Teal, forensic wildlife photographer, native flora and fauna, insects and fungi, best known for his brilliant photography of the strangest insect and fungi life forms, including spider-eating fungi. Yeah, I've got some fungi that grow in my honey garden. One looks like a penis and the other looks like a vagina.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Hey guys. Pretty cool to be here. No, it wasn't exactly planned. Most of the speakers here are trained professionals and learned experts and stuff. I've more just got some photos from the backyard. It's a nice garden. But I'm in the 2484. I was actually born in Moolumbar, but I moved away. And I came back in 2020 and I started taking photos of the backyard. So I ended up, so many cool bugs here. Most of the photos I take, I'm on the veranda drinking a cup of coffee and some weird butterfly lands on my hand and I'm like, oh wow, take a snap. It took a while to sort of start getting IDs and stuff happening. So this is my backyard here. So it's sort of a little bit washed out with the light and stuff, but I mean it's a nice backyard. But it's certainly but it certainly held a lot more than I thought. And I think one thing a lot of people forget is like you see a tree and it might have some flowers on it and you're like, oh, this tree brings butterflies, right? But that same tree is a roost for birds, or it might be a spot where a mosquito shelters from the water, or its roots might be supporting weird fungi and stuff. So even though most of the time I was walking up to the same tree, over 2 years, I saw a lot of different creatures on the same tree or the same rock. I would have a lizard one day and a slug the next. So if you want to start a little slideshow, I'll try and keep up. There's going to be a little bit of a Clockwork Orange indoctrination, a little bit of flicker. I'll make you love the backyard, whether it's, So this is what it looked like most of. We've just had 2 La Nina seasons, and we got to learn all about landslips and floods and stuff. There's a little baby pink tongue, like a blue tongue, and this is start of a Disney princess montage. So I got a nice little froggy, and I rescued this nice wasp from a bucket of water and got a photo while it was drying out. This is one of the pink underwing moths. So you might have seen like the Punisher skull caterpillars. They always go viral on Facebook. But a good sign that the vines are there. So I started taking photos of the grasshoppers, and I very quickly realised that there was like 100 types of grasshopper. There's a little mimic wasp. It's actually a mantis fly, like a praying mantis. And another rescue in the floods. I didn't mean to rescue that one, of course. It just ended up. Golden stag beetles. So these are like the witchetty grubs that everyone's scared of eating their soil and stuff and their plant roots. So they get rid of them and then wonder where all the Christmas beetles are. But there are so many beetles. And, at first I was just going to show you some fungi photos. And then I started going through, and this is my girlfriend Jade taking a photo, and yeah, another one of them there. That's one of those white-tailed hawk moths, which is wicked. So many spiders. These are the mirror balls, right? So every mirror ball I've taken a photo of has been different patterns, so it worked out. Little 2 spines. So a lot of these spiders are quite small. These are the archies, right? So archies are like something out of Avatar. Little wraparound spider. So got up to 400 spider species now on the property. This is my favourite of the jumping spiders. So this is a boy of the Morphus mormons, and he's got those white whiskers there, and there's the girl there snacking on a wasp. One thing about taking photos of jumping spiders, I always jump on the camera. You end up with them all over you. So there's that crab spider. So these ones change colour to match the colour of the flower they're on. One of the big huntsmans. That's probably the most common spiders, the huntsmans. This is a sunset huntsman, so like the bandit, these are a little bit more rare. They haven't actually been described properly. These are all the eyeballs of the different big spiders, the water spiders and stuff. So I ended up with a lot of photos. This is probably the most intimidating spider around here, aside from the funnel webs, but these get really large, the golden orbs, and we have the giant golden orbs. It's like one of the little long-jawed ones. A lot of the spiders live in tunnels and stuff, so you don't see them, whereas these ones here are bark crab spiders. They mimic the bark, and a lot of the time, there's another one, different coloration. A lot of the time you'll have a whole heap on a tree and you'll walk past it every day, never know got a bit of family there. This one here is actually trying to look like bird poop. This is another archie. So there's so many different types of archies that, and a lot of them are quite small, so it's really hard to tell what they actually are. Are they a bit of poo? Are they a dead bug? Here's a really interesting little one. It's a Clabonia species, but I haven't actually managed to get that one ID'd. I got pretty exciting. And this one here is a type of grasshopper, and it's the only photograph of a live one. And it was literally right beside the tap. And it was like, you millions of frogs. Like I really wanted to show off some frog photos for you, but got a little bit complicated. The weevil beetles. So with all the rain, we've had heaps of the fungi. So those are super common fungi, the yellow ruffy. But I find lots of them. The purple coral mushrooms. So you get there's a bit of an aquatic theme going on around here a lot of the time. The rainforest, a lot of creatures look like crabs or corals or stuff. Little earth stars, it's like a puffball come out and spray all this stuff everywhere. And all the bells. So all these fungi, a lot of people worry about picking fungi and stuff, but the fungi is sort of like an apple on a tree. But you've got to imagine the tree upside down in the ground and putting the fruits up the top rather than the fruits hanging down from the tree itself. Some of them pretty organic. There's like a little eyelash cup. Maybe pretty gross. And a bit of a montage there with the mix-up of the mushrooms. So lots and lots and lots and lots of fungi here. This is one of my favourites. So this is Stabella. It's very, very small, so it's hard to see what you're actually looking at here. But I found 4 species of these, and every time I post them, people overseas get really excited. People dedicate their lives to these little tiny types of fungi. And all of these are still the same Stabella, so you'll have maybe 10 different types of it, and it's the same species, and it's all changing into spores and little droplet things. And I just like these ones because they've got the little ball on the end, but still looks very like a coral reef, right? And sort of rainforests, the closest analogy we have. This is a weird one, a bollard eater, so it's actually a mushroom being eaten by another mushroom. So mushrooms eat lots of stuff, and this is another mushroom getting eaten by a mushroom, but the black hairs in it, it's hard to see. They're actually a mushroom living inside that jelly mushroom. So this is the first meat-eating mushroom I found. So about 2 years ago, almost. And that's a spider. This is my zombie hunting kit. So these are mind control parasites that get inside and control the spider or the bug. I do a lot of bush regen, so this is my standard everyday carry. I'm in a lot of mud. That's a World War II brush axe. A lot of camphororals have died at the hands of that thing. And these are some of the camphorlaurel leaves, in this one. We can see the little fungi in them. That's mostly lantana. So I mainly hit the lantana, the camphorlaurels, and the bloody devil's fix, monsters. Sort of, I don't have anything nice to say about them. But I do get lots of nice little critters off them, right? And they really do vary a lot, even though they're pretty small. There's obviously like an ant there, there's a spider there, there's a ladybug over there. And so I started doing these samples from plants that were going on to the burn or the compost pile. So I'm not taking these off any sort of natives, and I sort of, it really sort of hammered home, like camphorlaurels, terrible trees, but the wildlife that's here does make use of them, and even though a lot of these weeds have got to go, we need to replace them with other stuff that other creatures can sort of live on. So you can see like it's starting to get, and almost all the photos here are from at least a year ago. So I have fresh stuff to drop, but I figured for these ones I'd stick with some of the older stuff. So it very quickly started to add up, and most people don't see one of these little mind control fungi in their lives, and I found after a year that I was past the 2,000 mark that I was photographing. Sort of give you some sort of closer up single photos. So that was a spider with a purple mushroom growing out of its head. You can sort of see these guys where they're starting to move across. We call these ones nuggets because they're a nice bright yellow. You'd think that would make them a lot easier to find, but until you sort of trained your eyes a little bit on them, they're surprisingly easy to miss. So initially, there's very little to tell that the spider or the bug is in trouble. The fungi does live along with it, just like gut bacteria and fungi and stuff in humans. And then it does start to infiltrate and take over the brains and control the creature to move it to somewhere. This one here was high up in a tree fern. You can see these balls here where it's going to be firing out the spore packets. And basically most of these creatures will try to, the fungi will move them somewhere where its spores can drop down on a target species. So if it's a spider, it'll generally be above leaves where other spiders would go. Or if it's an ant, they'll try and do it above like a trail. And they really do mess with your head after a while. Like that's a tiny little jumping spider on its back there. But a lot of the time you put up a photo and people are like, is that a mouse? Is that a person? And this is one of those archy spiders from before, so little crab spiders, and there's one that isn't infected, nice and healthy, and there's one where the fungus has completely converted it to fungi food and it's starting to flower out. So there's one nice and early, and if you get them early you can usually tell what host it is. A lot of the time once it's progressed, good luck knowing what it ever was. And yeah, a little bit sad. The eyes are usually pretty expressive on the jumping spiders, whether they're alive or dead. This is Spot. He's a single gibuella, which is all these words I don't want to say in public because I've never said them aloud before, but they're all complicated. You can see these ones here are getting multiple sort of spikes coming up in them before all the fruiting spores are going to be dropping off, and they start getting pretty wild. Like most of the time you may only see them with one, but when they do start really fruiting, be pretty impressive. A lot of the time cultures will call them flowers, so you can see it pretty small, and then when you zoom in on them, they're pretty impressive. I've upset a lot of labs because I don't have a mount to take photos through a microscope, and a lot of these things you can't actually tell the different species. So even though these gibuellas are found all around the world, a lot of the time it'll be a species complex. So one species may end up being 20 different species, but you do need genetics to actually work out what you're looking at. And they do range a lot in colours. Those ones were sort of grey and stuff, and there's a nice red one. So they grow those little spikes, and then usually what they'll happen is they'll have a sexual sort of nub, like a flower on the top, and you'll end up with almost like a dandelion sort of flower or something. Yeah, I mean, they look like a lot of different plant seeds, to be honest. That's how I normally sort of try and remember them. And so far these have all been spiders, so you can tell at this point, the legs are gone. The fungi is going after the softest tissue first, the abdomen and stuff, and so what you're usually left over with is so like the hollowed out legs. It's like when something eats a crab, right? You end up with all the shell and stuff. That does help, like make IDs. Like I did ID this spider, I forget the name, but I was able to just from the eyes. Now, if they're not on a feral species that I'm chopping out, then I'll usually just leave them there and take photos. So like with that one there, I was able to track it for almost 4 months, and whereas most mushrooms will be out in a couple of days, this is the Papua New Guinea one. This is a nice one. These are on spiders, almost always on huntsmans. I do have the name because it's a tricky name. Purpureocilium. And even though the other ones I was about to say, you can sometimes see them up there for months as they go through and hang in the whole time, growing new spores and dropping them. These ones here, usually only about a week. So this is another type, which is hard to bloody say the name of. This is Metahisium, and that's it on a cicada there. So it has these really distinct green sort of forms that grow all over it. So it'll get the cicadas when they're in the ground or when they're adults. It's not a fussy one, actually. There it is on a big jumping ant, a bull ant. I think that's a king cricket, some sort of grasshopper or something. But it does start off white and gets all fuzzy. My girlfriend found this one, we call it the Walking Dead. And you can see those legs left behind. So on the moths, we get a lot more acanthomeses. This one here is more of an insect destroyer, but you see, kind of broke the flower spike coming out of the caddy. But I do see a lot on butterflies and caterpillars. They're always very dramatic, the caterpillars, when they die. This isn't actually one of the mind control parasites. This is just a normal sort of mold. And this is the houseflies. I'm not the biggest fly fan, so when I see the fly massacres and stuff, I rarely shed a tear for them, like with the jumping spiders and stuff. But sometimes it can be pretty full on. I'm not sure if you can make it out there, but on that little branch there's probably 50 dead flies. So, and this is a slightly different one. So it starts off looking pretty fuzzy, and then you start on the fly getting this little tiny spike coming up, and then it grows into long ones. A lot of the time you'll get 3 or 2 spikes coming out after it, and then one of them after another will start sort of swelling up. It's filling with spores, and then it turns into a full-on sort of mushroom. You sort of see the holes. And now this one here is upside down, so even though I've got it like that, and the spores are actually firing out of it with a fair bit of force. These are moth pupa, so there's a one that you probably recognise the name more of. It's a type of cordyceps, so Tanupis. And yeah, so you just see it like flowering out of a dead log or under some bark, and if you move it you can actually see the pupa of it. This one here's on a cicada pupa. Isara sinclara, or something like that. This one we're not quite sure what it is. I did actually have a really good conversation with someone about it. This is another similar one on a beetle larvae. These ones here are on spiders, so this is a totally different one, and this is one that inhabits moss. So the spider crawls through the moss and gets stung by the spores, and they burn their way in. There's a different type on an ant. You can nickname these ones the daisies because they have these large, big clumps of spores that break off, and the creatures seem to like them. These are those really small black ants that half of us probably had come in our house during the rain. Only tiny. I was hoping that would spread and wipe them all out in the area, but no luck. These are another type of ant. So these are Orpheocordyceps, sorry. And you probably know these ants as well. They're the ones that stick the leaves together, and they'll have like 10 little nests in their tree. Now, when the fungi makes the ant bite into the wood and hold on with its death grip, other ants are in a race to try and pick it up and throw it away, because it'll always bite itself down somewhere along the path going back to the nest. And if they can get rid of the corpse before it starts pumping out spores, they may lose the ant that does the corpse disposal, but they save the nest. I was pretty lucky in this case. This is in the backyard as well still, that they weren't able to remove one before it did the whole nest. This is a particularly interesting little host, the pentid. Never actually seen this type of fungi on that. This is one of those little yellow-shouldered ladybugs. These are all a very similar type of fungi called Hirsutella citriformis. So you can see by the time the plant hopper's sort of barely recognisable as a plant hopper. There's a sort of younger little tree hopper on there as well. The fungi has actually produced several generations of spores, so it's not like a mushroom that produces one big thing of spores and then the mushroom's gone. This will drop all its spores and just grow new ones. It's tricky with these photos, but even when it's to that point, there's always hints of what type of bug it is. In that case, it still had the white fluffs coming out the back of the plant hopper. These are still all on plant hoppers. Plant hoppers are very, very diverse creatures. And one thing with these parasites is that they tend to only go after one species. So for all the different species of ants, they've all got a separate fungi hunting them. And many of them have quite a few. This is a little bit of a progression on one of these flat-headed plant hoppers. And even though at first they're quite small and could also similar, this is on a paper wasp nest. And when I was younger, I always took out paper wasp nests, and I didn't kill this one. And the fungi annihilated it, so I was pretty stoked. This is another one, different type of wasp, but very, very similar type one. And this has actually got, it's hard to see, the little burst out in the side. So that was a spider that had actually been impregnated by a wasp with its baby, and then had been attacked by the zombie. And these are different types of fungi eating the zombie fungi that's eating the bug. So just because the fungi has finished eating the host doesn't mean other things have finished eating the thing that's eating the host. We call those hyperparasites. This is a really common one. Imagine people have seen them in the yard and didn't know what they are, but you get these little tiny insects called scale and mealybugs. And they're really small, but they really do suck into plants and do damage overall. So this is, you can kind of see the scale bug there. It looks like a little trilobite or something. And there's a couple of them there, and you can see the fungi growing. So the fungi will normally get, 500% bigger than the host. So it's not like from one little meal that, they're only going to grow so much. It's kind of crazy how much mushroom you get from just one little piece of nutrition. At first, when I took a photo of this, I was just like, these things are so boring. But now that I've taken a couple of thousands of photos of them, and you look at them, it's kind of surprising how different they all are. So I nicknamed these the fried eggs. But Hypocrella and Acherosonia. There's a lot of Latin in this sort of thing. There's not many common names, unfortunately. Most of the common names I've said they're not official. They're just, in the field working names. And you do get the same sort of balls with the cluster munitions spraying out. This is probably my favourite one that I've found, actually. It's a decent size, about a 5-cent piece. And then, once again, getting monstered by other types of fungi. So this is those previous fungi that were going after scale bugs, and then they're being eaten by something else. There's another really interesting one. There's a reasonably rare sort of fungi, and most of the names and stuff that I've worked out, I actually owe to this Facebook group here. I've managed to link up with some of the real world experts. In fact, Nigel Hume-Jones is like the godfather. He's been poached by a lab. This is my little brush with fame earlier. So this is Catherine and Steve, and they did the Planet Earth 2 documentary. They did all the stop motion animation for the fungi and stuff, and they came out. Here we are doing some zombie ants, and I took them for a little bit of a hunt, and we did pretty well. I don't want to brag too hard, but I think we got about 80 in a couple of hours, so they were blown away because they're like professional, travel the world and find fungi, right? So a documentary coming out the end of this year, I think, called Following the Rain. But if anyone wants to get a little bit of Yukai fame. And so this is a type of penicillin, and it's growing out of a palm tree seed, a Bangalore palm tree seed. But it can only do so if the Bangalore palm seed has actually been eaten out by these little borer beetle larvae. And then the penicillin molds can grow up through it. And there's lots of different types of penicillin, right? Lots of them. Like, there's thousands and thousands of them. So this is one that grows on possum poo. And so I have been sending off a lot of these samples to the DPI in Queensland, just out of interest, because, organic pest control and stuff. We've got a lot of things like fire ants and crazy ants where I'm like, man, maybe I can help out. This is one of the DPI's most successful releases around here. This is the lantana leaf miner beetle. And this is what it does to the lantana leaves. It's starting to really kick in around the place, and it's pretty tough. I'm a big fan of the biocontrol, and this is the lantana leaf hoppers. So I used to never ever see these things. These are babies, so they're pretty interesting. And I've just, this is just some random photos, and I ran them through some AI filters and stuff. But yeah, talking back to the penicillin, a lot of the samples I sent off had already been ID'd. Quite a few of them I'm waiting for. But some of the samples I sent got a mould growing on them. I don't know if you guys experienced mould after all that rain. Everything went mouldy, my windows went mouldy. But it turns out one of the moulds is a penicillin pneumocystis. So, it's still a while to go, not confirmed. But it looks like I might be getting a mould named after me, which I'm pretty chuffed about from taking photos and turning over leaves in the backyard. It's been a lot of fun, and it's really sort of hammered home just how lucky we are here and just how much gardens contribute overall to the wildlife in the area. You may think that, something's eating, your rose bush or something, but that could be some obscure caterpillar, it could be a bird that's passing through, it's pretty impressive. People underestimate exactly what's in their garden, and they forget that, most of the things there are trying to hide from you, so you're not going to see them. But if you go to the same spot in your garden each night with your phone and a torch, I guarantee the species will start stacking up. At first I was just taking photos of frogs and lizards and snakes and that sort of stuff. And another thing that's sort of hammered home too is you know, it's all organic and stuff out that garden, but there's lots of different types of pollution, you know, and one of the big types of pollution we have at the moment is people burning fossil fuels. Everyone's always talking about CO2 and carbon monoxide and methane, and, you know, fungi don't care about any of that. They breathe oxygen like us, but they have a high tolerance for CO2. They can be in the ground. What fungi don't like, especially the important ones that are growing around all the roots on all the trees and keeping life going as we know it, making soil and stuff, they care about nitrogen. And when you burn fossil fuels, you produce nitrogen gases, and they actually poison the fungi. And so in a park like this, with the trees around the outside that are exposed to exhaust gases and stuff, the diversity of the fungi in the roots would actually be really low. And that's a problem, because the fungi is sort of competing against the insects, even though it's eating dead wood and, you know, fuel load, you know, it is sort of releasing CO2, but the important thing is that while fungi is alive, it's a carbon-based life form, and all of that carbon is trapped within it. And the biggest carbon sinks we have on the planet are underneath all the forests. You know, it's all about keeping stuff alive. You know, there's no, if the carbon is inside the mushroom and inside the mold and inside the cricket, it's not in the air. And that's sort of what we've got to do. We've got to try and recapture it all. You know, I'm talking about, you know, the guy before being worried about, you know, not getting a job in the future because you've got an arrest for protesting against a gas fracking or something. Like, why would you want to work for those people? I see it more like as the little World War II poster with the kids looking up at their dad. What did you do during the 2020s? You know, everyone's got to do their little bit. If you can have a garden, that's a huge bit. It makes a little stepping watering stones for our creatures. And if you're, you know, if you're lucky enough to be like I am, and I've got Jerusalem Park, National Park, not very far away, and the property that I'm on has been allowed to tree up, you know, and we find that all of this wildlife is coming out of these ancient, you know, craters. There's like a dead volcano that's been eroding forever up there, and it's full of weird creatures. And if you give them a suitable site to come and chill at, you will find all these creatures. Like, it is wild, and you'll be putting up photos of moths, and people will be trying to come out and find the vine that they eat, or, you know, rock and roll. But yeah, cheers for letting us come up and show some stuff to you.
We're out of time, but it wouldn't be fair to allow at least one question.
But it is mainly the gas burning up in the ecosystem. Like, it all comes down to diversity. You'll get higher productivity in those areas because you've got more nutrients for everything to bioaccumulate and go nuts with, but you'll get less diversity. You'll get more weedy species. You won't get as many different types of fungi. And it's ecology is all diversity. It really is. Like an ecosystem where a grasshopper has 100 parasites is far more healthy than an ecosystem where a grasshopper has no parasites. Like, you can really see, like, something has to be healthy. There's something to feed on it. There's something to feed on that. There's something to feed on that, and you end up with these food chains which go round in circles and are just so complicated. And then you see, you go have a look beside a proper farmed field, and you might get 20 species. You know.
Thank you very much, Dominic.